Had a question from Garrett Savage. Savage question here. So appropriately, Garrett brought it to us. He said, what's a penny stock team you'd buy into? What's a blue chip team you would sell? Basically, Garrett said it the way he said it. Here's how I took this question. Let's go based on last year, the results we had last year, the results I think teams could have this year, some teams that we would buy, some teams we would sell. I got to start with Florida State because that's the most obvious buy. Because how in the world does it get worse than 2-10 last year? There's not much argument to be made here. Like they could still be very bad this year and improve off of their record last year. So overall talent roster is much better than people expect. Because you expect that they're terrible because they went 2-10. They're not terrible. It's just everything, season from hell vibes. That's what we had last year. Everything that could possibly go wrong, even stuff that their worst enemies never imagined wishing upon them, went wrong. They've got 2 new coordinators. You know they brought in Malzahn. I think you know that. They also brought in Tony White, who for my money may be one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. So they made moves. Norvell is handing off play calling duties to Gus Malzahn. I went down there and asked him about it last week. We'll release the video tomorrow on the channel. He talked about that. But I'll tell you what else you should pay attention to here. And that's the amount of portal guys they took in last year's class that did not immediately pan out. And the way people think about the portal is you go sign guys, and either they immediately, boom, they contribute, or it's a bust. Not always the case. Earl Little is just an example of a player that they're talking a lot about internally down there when we were down there the other day that comes to mind. Earl Little, they went and got him from Alabama. Well, Earl didn't really contribute all that much last year, so he's a bust, right? Well, no, because he's still in the program, and now he's shining this spring. Do they have a couple of guys that do that from that last portal class? How bad is the taste in the mouth? Like how thoroughly did they wash the stench of last year off? And also, they took fewer question marks in this year's portal class. They went and got production, proven production, like they did a couple of cycles ago. They're not going to be as bad as 2-10. I don't know how much they'll improve, but that's an easy buy. I'll tell you who else I'd buy is Washington. Washington was 6-7 last year, but the thing is, everyone looked at it and said, well, that's because they lost Kalen DeBoer. No, it's not. Totally. It's because they lost 20 of 22 starters. So DeBoer would have taken a big step back record-wise, in my opinion, had he stayed at Washington. He didn't. Jedd Fisch came in, and so Jedd Fisch is the poster child for the fall off from national championship game to 6-7. I think they'll be better this year. Damon Williams has real breakout quarterback potential, like star quarterback potential, maybe even a household name by year's end, depending on what their record is. But they got some big games. However, it is a manageable schedule by Big Ten standards, and they're a hot start candidate too. If you look at their schedule, it's not front-loaded. Some of these teams out there that got questions, they've also got 3 of their biggest games in the first 5 weeks of the season. Washington plays Colorado State, UC Davis, at Washington State. Then they got Ohio State at home. So they got 3 weeks where, crazier things have happened, but I would expect them. That game at Washington State, I'm never assuming a rivalry game outcome, but they go to Michigan later in the year. They got Oregon at home the last weekend of the year. 6-7 last year. I expect improvement. I expect improvement from Oklahoma. Hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're not, I humbly ask that you click subscribe. It's free. It doesn't sign you up for anything. What it does is it helps us keep this show free so we can just do college football year-round. All right, back to the clip. I said that weird. Oklahoma. There we go. 6-7 last year. They were 2-6 in league play. Here's why. Let me tell you why I wouldn't expect improvement. Their schedule is the toughest in the country. So we're going to say that a lot. So let's get that out of the way. I still expect improvement despite that because it's one of the best defensive lines in the league, maybe the country. I think the issues, obviously, last year were majority offense. And I'll give you a stat here. They were 130th in explosive plays last year. Well, Washington State was 10th, which is relevant because they went and got Washington State's offensive coordinator and quarterback. And so they bring them in. I think the roster is a top 15 roster in the country. They may not compete for the playoff. Maybe the schedule's too tough. But I think if this offensive coordinator quarterback thing clicks, and I think it will and they think it will, Oklahoma's going to be a much improved team. At least good enough to where their record's above 500. So I'd buy them. This is going to be a little controversial here. I don't think it's crazy to sell on Georgia. Now, not long term, but if we're talking about last year compared to this upcoming year, guys, they won the SEC last year, and they're below 50% returning production, and I wonder what the nucleus of the team is. Normally, it's running game and defense, and they didn't even really do that well last year. And so now, I still really don't know that they're all that proven at tailback. They have to replace a lot along the offensive line. Defensive line and edge kind of relying on underclassmen. There's really good players. They got scholarships to Georgia for a reason. So a lot of times at Georgia, or in about 3 or 4 of the programs out there, you could have an All-American by year's end whose name you don't know. That could happen anywhere. It disproportionately happens at places like that. So it's not that it can't happen. If you're trying to guess what's most likely to happen, Gunnar Stockton is starting at quarterback here. Stockton's a really good athlete, but he's also a mystery. He's a mystery until he proves something. Now, if you're at practice every day, I heard he had a really good scrimmage this past weekend. That's wonderful. And I expect him to get pretty good quarterback play. I don't think you'll ever watch Georgia just be horrific at quarterback. But if we're asking if they're going to improve off winning the SEC, I think it's more likely that they take a step back than they take a step forward. That's all I'm saying. I'd say the same thing about Colorado. Deion Sanders has silenced a lot of people, me included, who had questions about his approach. And I still don't have questions about it. But if we're talking about last year where they went 9-4 to this year, I think it's probably more likely without Shedeur, they take a step back. Shedeur Sanders was a miracle worker. There's no world, there is no way that he should have been able to do what he did behind that offensive line with very little running game to speak of and still made stuff happen. So this year, I don't have reason to believe the offensive line will be, quantumly improved from last year. Maybe it will be. There have been facets of this team that have surprised me before, but if we're to believe that it's not massively improved, well, now we got Juju Lewis, who age-wise should still be in high school, and he's competing against Caden Salter, and you're not asking whether Colorado's going to fall off a mountain. They could just minorly regress and lose 3 more games than they did last year because the Big 12 is so insanely compressed and competitively balanced. They took 17 transfers, too, and only one of them was a blue chipper. So either they found a lot of diamonds in the rough or the roster may just not be as good. Travis Hunter also, won the Heisman last year. Not there this year. So I think it's more likely than not Colorado falls back. I think it's more likely than not Tennessee has a worse record this year. This is April when I'm telling you this, but their run game and defense, that's what carried them last year, and they're losing Sampson and Pierce off the defensive side. They're losing several offensive linemen. They're relying on underclassmen at wide receiver, and basically here's what it comes down to me, with Tennessee. Nico Iamaleava has to not only progress, he's got to be good enough to elevate guys around him. The best quarterbacks can do that. Coming out of high school, you thought he may be that. I'm not writing off the potential for him to be that. I'm saying he hasn't been that yet through 1 year, and he needs to be that this year. But they were 10-2 and a playoff team last year. So what's more likely than not this year? I think it's more likely that they win 9 games than 11 games, is what I'm trying to tell you.